Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was entirely oblivious to the fact that the unassuming folder resting on the table served as a ruinous, career-ending trap. She had just concluded a fiery, self-assured address to the budget panel regarding the deconstruction of the upper crust, completely unaware that Vice President JD Vance had spent his entire weekend rigorously scrutinizing her Federal Election Commission records. He did not merely skim them. He probed the financial numbers with the detached, tactical precision of a corporate raider dismantling an overvalued company, tracking every solitary penny back to its origin. As her impassioned tirade against billionaire-funded politicians concluded, Vance held back from shouting or acting surprised. Alternatively, he calmly opened an alarmingly slender, unmarked folder, cutting through the political drama to deliver a single disastrous figure into the total quiet $53,500. Staring directly at her, he inquired if she knew the amount of $27 donations that sum equated to. She lost her opportunity to answer. In that suspended instance, the country watched as the vice president methodically tore down a progressive icon's exorbitant lodging expenditures, utilizing her very own campaign documents and the harsh reality of simple arithmetic. The date was the 28th of May, 2025. Inside room 608 of the Dirksen Senate office building, the heavy, sterile atmosphere of Washington's administrative stage concealed the truth of what seemed like a routine budget committee meeting regarding political funding. In reality, it was a perfectly crafted ambush designed to drag contemporary politics' most prominent grassroots earner into the harsh spotlight of public scrutiny. Ocasio-Cortez was summoned as the paramount authority, practically idolized as the digital trailblazer who converted Instagram into an unstoppable fundraising engine, turning the request for $27 into a colossal cultural movement. Overseeing this fraught gathering from the elevated dais was Vance, serving simply as an administrative phantom. Washington insiders anticipated he would gently tap the gavel, remain completely silent, and fade into the background. However, when AOC walked in, she wholly dominated the room. Sporting a strikingly crisp white blazer and her trademark bright red lipstick akin to battle makeup, she exhibited the perfect, commanding demeanor of an individual who had conquered the lenses well before senior lawmakers had even figured out how to use a microphone. She gracefully took her seat at the timber desk and purposely shifted her microphone not to enhance the audio, but because in the unforgiving theater of D.C., that gesture equates psychologically to a fighter bumping gloves prior to a bout. Her piercing, calculating gaze assessed the anxious panel, scanned the packed media section, and ultimately locked on to the presiding chair. Vance stayed in a daunting, absolute hush, the surprisingly thin binder sitting motionless on the desk like a loaded weapon. In a rapid, instinctive decision, taking exactly 2 lethal seconds, a choice destined to ruin 2 years of meticulously gathered political power, she decided to ditch her prepared notes, step directly into the trap, and launch a frontal offensive. Mr. Vice President, she commenced, her voice carrying the sharp, abrasive edge of a provocation. Prior to discussing grassroots contributions, I have to acknowledge the obvious issue. Or, more accurately, the oligarch occupying the seat. The atmosphere within the chamber immediately fractured and became strained, given that standard fiscal hearings typically commence with dull, tiresome monologues, rather than a representative initiating a ferocious verbal strike on the vice president. You occupy that chair because a tech tycoon, Peter Thiel, believed you would be useful, she proclaimed, increasing her speed. You are not here because of modest contributors. You are not in attendance because the hardworking people of Ohio genuinely believed in a grassroots effort. You hold that post because a single individual signed a massive check One person picked you out of a wealthy investment company and concluded, "This man will suffice." She paused, tilting her visage marginally to look right into the C-SPAN camera, pulling off her dramatic hesitation perfectly because Ocasio-Cortez did not simply speak, she performed, and every magnificent performance requires a pause prior to the crescendo. Consequently, before this committee attempts to lecture anyone regarding financial openness, maybe start with the individual grasping the gavel, she challenged him. She was not nearly finished, deploying her customary strategy of overwhelming force, delivering 3 vicious blows when a single one would suffice, ensuring the viewers caught the shareable video segment. You want to talk about the establishment? You represent the establishment, she accused with indignant fury. You went from penning stories regarding destitution to gladly serving in the richest administration in American history. You do not fight the elite. You married into their ranks. You took Thiel's money, enlisted in Trump's squad, and shamelessly sold your impoverished history to the top bidder. Extending an open palm, an action thoroughly refined on digital platforms to appear deeply enthusiastic yet marginally less threatening on screen, she pushed her attack further. And currently you are perched up there, moderating a panel on political finance like a wolf, gleefully teaching a course on poultry enclosure security. Utilizing an additional heavy hesitation, she permitted the theatrical declaration to hang before dropping her tone into a voice of mocking disappointment. Are you aware of what I genuinely picture when I look at you up there? I observe the youth from your autobiography. The youngster from Middletown, the child who ate at McDonald's and wore cheap used garments, and I question where did that youngster vanish to, because he is certainly not sitting in that seat. Peter Thiel occupies that chair. Silicon Valley sits in that position. The youngster from Middletown is simply the fabricated history they use to peddle the product. A muted, electrified murmur drifted through the packed chamber. Behind the representative, her junior aide stood prepared with a smartphone, typing frantically as the first viral message was composed regarding the wolf teaching a course remark. Up on the dais, Vance deployed a completely unexpected strategy. He sincerely grinned. It was a faint, highly deliberate, and utterly terrifying smile of a lethal predator who had just watched his target voluntarily present the precise tactical weakness he required. Her fierce onslaught had inadvertently provided him with 2 fatal blind spots. Initially, she aggressively cited billionaire fortunes, busting the transparency topic wide open, oblivious that openness cuts both ways. Secondly, she mentioned Middletown and the youth, ignorant that the profoundly scarred child with the free McDonald's beverage, oversized secondhand clothes, and addicted parent unconscious on the ground was still there. That youngster had simply learned how to mercilessly dissect financial papers. He maintained his total, continuous quiet until she was fully done, and then paused for exactly 3 agonizing extra seconds prior to methodically opening the folder. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, Vance finally responded, his voice emitting the very same consistent, resolute, Midwestern cadence it always possessed, accurately calibrated to the specific wavelength that subconsciously compels listeners to lean forward. I value that. I genuinely admire the fervor. And I want to address your point regarding the elite, because I strongly maintain it is significant. He looked momentarily at the pristine folder, then directed his piercing gaze back toward her. In fact, I wish to examine your relationship with the establishment in careful detail. Specifically, your extensively reported 2025 fighting oligarchy expedition alongside Senator Sanders. 34 appearances, 20 regions, 300,000 attendees. Extremely remarkable. A bona fide political victory. He turned over a lone piece of paper. I merely possess a few precise inquiries concerning how you actually commuted to those locations. Down at the table, AOC's posture remained rigorously disciplined as she balanced on the narrow edge between attacking and defending, staying completely calm and totally oblivious to the nightmare concealed within that folder. Your 2025 FEC filings, which are accessible to the populace, Representative, show that you and the senator traveled to your fighting oligarchy rallies solely by means of corporate aircraft. Vance announced, reading directly from the paper, the senator's operation spent a colossal $550,000 on private flight companies in 2025 Ventura Air Services, Net, Cirrus Aviation. The primary jet utilized was a Bombardier Challenger, which features one of the most spacious luxury cabins of any business aircraft available. He lifted his face, locking eyes directly with her. In April 2025, Fox News obtained verified photographs of you and the senator boarding that exact aircraft at Meadows Field in Bakersfield, California, and exiting in Sacramento that identical evening, proceeding straight to a fighting oligarchy rally. He intentionally set the paper on the wooden table. A Bombardier Challenger costs roughly $15,000 an hour to charter. You utilized it to lecture diligent Americans regarding fighting the rich. He paused for devastating, dramatic impact. In 2023, you unequivocally declared, and I am citing straight from your authenticated internet accounts, Representative, frankly, what number of private jets do these executives require? It is avaricious. It is intolerable. Those are your exact phrasing, 2023. Regarding corporate leaders and private aircraft, a few years subsequent, you enthusiastically boarded the identical kind of premium plane you explicitly called avaricious, and you utilized it to teach strained citizens to battle the very people who fly in those aircraft. That is not merely acting hypocritically, Representative. That is passionately voicing a conviction, intentionally recording yourself, voicing it, broadcasting it for 36 million followers to view, and then shamelessly performing the exact contrary behavior and deducting it as a tax-exempt political expense. Allowing the total devastation to register, Vance offered a brutal personal contrast. Allow me to be frank regarding a matter, he continued quietly. When I ran for the Ohio Senate position in 2022, I operated a rented automobile, a Chevy Malibu from Enterprise. Its color was silver. I remember the exact color because I suffered through 247 excruciating hours inside that automobile across 4 drawn-out months. I drove it from Columbus to Cleveland to Cincinnati to Middletown and returned. I ate stale fuel station food in the operator's seat, the depressing kind securely wrapped in plastic that you strongly pray was made this morning, but heavily doubt was assembled the day prior. I once finished a live national radio transmission idling in a Sheetz parking area in Lancaster, Ohio, because that specific Sheetz provided free internet access, and my underfunded operation was unable to purchase a mobile hotspot. Another heavy quiet descended. The Sheetz lot smelled powerfully of low-cost gasoline and meat links. The unstable signal dropped twice amidst the transmission. I wore cheap slacks from Target and a shirt that desperately required pressing, and I attained the damn win. His eyes darted back to Ocasio-Cortez, his voice abruptly morphing into a sharp blade. You journeyed to courageously fight the elite on a jet featuring the absolutely most massive cabin in business flight. I fought for a United States Senate seat from the grease-marked asphalt of a gas station, and I am considered the oligarch in this room? At the table, Ocasio-Cortez's jaw tightened a highly subtle bodily signal that seasoned analysts recognized as the involuntary reaction to a merciless blow piercing her defenses in an entirely unexpected spot. She had wholly failed to predict a silver Chevy Malibu counterattack. She opened her mouth to launch a panicked defense. Hold on. Vance declared evenly, turning another sheet with the unstoppable momentum of a massive tidal wave. Let us meticulously examine precisely where you stayed, Vance instructed, reciting from the fresh sheet. Your 2025 financial records officially log $53,500 in luxury hotel costs. He read the massive figure with the precise, exceptionally flat cadence of an accountant, turning the numbers into indisputable facts. I shall list a handful of the locations. The Langham Huntington in Pasadena, California, a renowned 5-star luxury destination. The Vidara Hotel and Spa in Las Vegas, 4 stars, immediately connected to the Bellagio. The Lansdowne Resort and Spa, located in the Virginia countryside. The Asher Adams in Salt Lake City, $300 for that brief stay. The Leo Kent, an upscale boutique lodge in Tucson, $365.76. Hotel El Convento, located in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and the Hyatt Grand Central, situated in Manhattan, which, Representative, is located precisely 7 miles from your private dwelling. Allowing the document to fall with a soft thud, he remarked, "You strangely squandered $3,000 on a luxury lodge located 7 miles from your actual house." A collective, shocked gasp audibly reverberated through the chamber as numerous people simultaneously did the arithmetic and were repulsed by the outcome. $53,500 in one solitary year, Vance repeated, asking if she knew the average household income in her specific district. AOC stayed silent, her expression hardened into a stoic mask, yet her right hand nervously slid down to her lap to hide itself. "I looked it up for you," Vance continued relentlessly. "The average family income within New York's 14th district is approximately $52,000. Your lavish lodging bill for merely a single year, just the premium beds you slept on, was $1,500 more than what your average voter earns in an entire exhausting year." He explained that while the gap was merely $1,500, it signified everything philosophically. Your constituents work 50 agonizing weeks per year, 50 weeks of crowded subway rides, tiring consecutive shifts, missed household dinners, and sirens sounding at 5:00 a.m. 50 weeks, and at the bitter end of those 50 weeks, they have earned $1,500 less than you casually squandered on premium getaways while traveling the country, telling them to aggressively fight the elite. AOC noticeably leaned forward, her voice tight with tension, interjecting that political travel is a legitimate expense. Vance surprisingly concurred, acknowledging the Langham Huntington is a valid accommodation. Yet similarly, a 5-star luxury holiday location boasting a tranquil Japanese garden and a lavish spa catalog that costs substantially more than a full day's wages for a diligent Bronx healthcare worker. Turning over a subsequent page, Vance addressed her eating patterns. "Allow me to be frank regarding a matter," he murmured, an expression the seasoned DC insiders currently recognized as the rhetorical blade being ruthlessly unsheathed. "When I was 17 years old, my ultimate idea of eating out was the McDonald's value menu. I would sit alone in a plastic booth at the McDonald's on Verity Parkway in Middletown, holding a cheap McChicken and a free cup. Water cups are totally complimentary. That was important. And I would look up at the bright display above the cashier, gazing at the lit-up pictures of Big Macs and Quarter Pounders radiating like stained glass within a cathedral, and I would say to myself, maybe someday." Shifting his gaze back toward Ocasio-Cortez, he read from her 2025 financial reports, exposing massive tabs at an upscale New York sushi restaurant featuring a $150 14-course tasting menu, a premium Vegas seafood establishment, and a stylish San Juan spot where specialty cocktails ran over $20. In Puerto Rico in particular, between June and September of 2025, Your campaign squandered $10,743.13 strictly on meals and premium food services, he revealed. Setting the document down, he asked if she realized what $150 procures in her district. Groceries for 2 entire weeks for a struggling household, or 2 full weeks of carefully preparing classroom lunches. And you casually blew it on 14 courses of handcrafted sushi and then stepped right to a stage to shout at your constituents that the greedy wealthy are choking the life from them. You are right. The rich are choking them. You are simply intentionally leaving out the part where you gluttonously ate 14 dishes on their $27 contributions. AOC's survival reflex activated, yet her attempt to categorize them as standard campaign died abruptly in her throat. She acutely understood how the clinical phrase standard campaign expense would echo bouncing immediately following the heartbreaking image of an impoverished youth grasping a free McDonald's cup, realizing the defense perished right at the term standard. Vance calmly turned an additional page, the folder becoming noticeably thinner and dragging the room agonizingly closer to the naked truth. August 2025. San Juan, Puerto Rico, Vance announced, "You delivered an impassioned speech about the terrors of gentrification, about working-class households being ruthlessly priced out of their very own historic neighborhoods. The real estate emergency in San Juan is exceedingly intense, and you spoke to their suffering with profound, genuine passion." The room braced for the carnage that invariably followed his sincere praises. That exact same week, during that exact same trip, you were widely recorded partying in a luxury VIP box at a Bad Bunny concert at the Coliseo de Puerto Rico, Vance disclosed, his tone dropping. Your campaign's financial report clearly shows $23,712.62 in facility rental charges at that exact same arena, 2 separate massive payments. You looked the strained residents of San Juan in the eye and declared they are being violently displaced from their historic homes. And then you celebrated the night away in a private VIP suite at a venue where your political apparatus had just blown $23,000 in the very same city, during the very same week. Shaking his deeply disappointed head at the mechanical hypocrisy of her actions, he pointed out that her campaign also wasted $9,440 at the luxury Hotel Palacio Provincial located in San Juan. Her total Puerto Rico spending for a single 3-month span was roughly $50,000 in a region where she deliberately informed strained residents that affluent elitists were taking their homes. Pausing to glance at his hands, he described what genuine gentrification looks like from the inside, not in San Juan, in Middletown. When the massive iron mills finally closed, the surrounding houses became cheap. And when household properties become cheap, the ruthless vultures show up. The small local predators who dive in and buy a whole decaying block of houses for $30,000 apiece, slap on some cheap coloring, and flip them for $120,000, permanently pricing out the terrified families who had occupied those exact spaces for 3 generations. I watched it happen in real time on my grandmother's exact avenue, Mama's lifelong friends. They were violently priced out, one by one, disappearing like teeth violently falling out of a smile. Gazing directly into Ocasio-Cortez's unwavering look, he declared he knew what gentrification felt like and would never dare to give a passionate speech using that deep agony only to party in a luxury VIP suite in the identical city that identical week. He noted the devastated people she claimed to defend could not even imagine funding the VIP suite or even the transportation cost to the arena's parking lot. That is not championing the laboring class, Representative. That is merely touring the laboring class in between expensive concert passes. Behind AOC, her aide's illuminated monitor stayed totally black and dormant in her lap, serving as a pale flag of surrender. AOC herself unconsciously retreated into the dense leather chair, totally exposed. Appending a lethal postscript masked in a casual voice, Vance declared, The Border Czar's office has formally confirmed that you are currently undergoing an official inquiry for illegally employing an undocumented immigrant and for deliberately hosting seminars educating individuals on how to successfully evade federal border agents. He pointedly noted that Article 1 of the Constitution, outlining the pledged duties of a sitting congressional member, absolutely does not include obstruction. Turning to the very last page, he warned he had to be extremely careful with this final matter, causing the entire chamber to physically feel the suffocating approach of the ultimate horrific stage. In March 2026, the National Legal and Policy Center officially lodged a severe FEC complaint, aggressively alleging that your campaign paid $18,725 to a Dr. Brian W. Boyle, Vance announced, reading the physician's name with perfect accuracy. 3 separate transactions totaling $18,725. All 3 of these massive disbursements were formally recorded on your national financial documents under the classification of leadership training and consulting. Dr. Boyle is a licensed mental health professional. He is widely described across credible medical publications as a leading, renowned specialist in ketamine-assisted treatments. He does not offer or supply leadership coaching or consulting services to any political entities. Placing the condemning document down, his voice noticeably softened to a sympathetic tone as he explicitly stated he was not turning this into an issue concerning mental health, mentioning his own mother's desperate requirement for assistance. He affirmed psychological well-being is absolutely not a political punchline or a partisan weapon, ensuring everyone understood his sincerity before his legal astuteness resurfaced. The primary issue here is not Dr. Boyle. The issue is absolutely not therapy. The issue is the fraudulent expenditure record on the federal fiscal document that explicitly reads leadership training and consulting. Because if these massive payments were truly for individual mental health care appointments, then they were strictly private expenses. And private expenses cannot, under any conditions, be legally paid for using political contributor funds. He emphasized that intentionally recording them as advising was not a simple clerical error, but a premeditated falsehood on a government form. Staring down at the architect of the grassroots movement, he asked if her devoted $27 everyday supporters, who passionately gave their hard-earned money to fight for them, knew it was funding secret medical treatments falsely documented under a completely fabricated category. AOC instinctively attempted to argue the disbursements were for a legitimate campaign, yet the sentence violently died because repeating the exact phrase currently facing a rigorous federal investigation for being totally false sounded like a terrified criminal doubling down. Her panicked subsequent endeavor concerning Dr. Boyle's labor also failed because finishing it entailed publicly admitting to psychological treatment or brazenly claiming political consulting. Cornered, her last try, stating she had been fully cooperative with, abruptly stopped, recognizing it as the exact doomed sentence uttered by politicians forced to hire a defense lawyer. Silenced by her own damaging paperwork, the famous AOC rapid-fire speaking cadence was completely shattered. Vance meticulously closed the folder and methodically intertwined his hands upon the desk. Representative, I possess one inquiry, Vance stated quietly, sending a ripple of dread through the room because his one inquiry always encapsulated all previous questions. Without bothering to look down, the statistics flowed flawlessly from his financial memory. $53,500 blown on luxury and boutique accommodations. $18,725 diverted to a psychiatrist, falsely recorded as consulting. Your carefully estimated private share of corporate jet charter cost strictly calculated at $80,000. Approximately $50,000 wasted in Puerto Rico during one solitary 3-month period. He paused, permitting the roughly $200,000 in lavish lifestyle expenditures creatively filed as political costs in a single year to hang heavily in the oppressive air. Your average grassroots supporter gives exactly $27, Vance pointed out. What number of $27 donations does it take to just pay for one solitary night at the Langham Huntington in Pasadena? Silence followed for 1 second, then 2, then 3. AOC did not move a single muscle, paralyzed in her stoic mask, but lacking any response for basic arithmetic. The tense committee chamber silently counted the ticking moments with racing heartbeats. At 8 seconds, AOC's right hand gradually shifted to grip her cold water tumbler with the pure, rigid terror of a scared passenger clutching a metal handle. A watchful reporter in the media section accurately timed the excruciating silence at 10.3 seconds, the absolute longest pause ever recorded in a congressional hearing. Vance finally offered a purposeful, solemn nod. "I will do the math for you," he offered, his voice carrying the profound sadness of a let-down teacher. One solitary night at the Langham Huntington costs roughly $4,000 at precisely $27 per standard donation. That amounts to 148 supporters, 148 working citizens, 148 exhausted people who unlocked their screens and carefully typed in their card numbers, numbers they know by painful repetition because they are forced to input them constantly for sky-high rent and expensive groceries. They gave $27 to you because they genuinely believed it was going toward the fight. He let the number 148 sit there, heavy and festering, 148 people. One night, one resort. For a person who commands those exact same 148 people to fiercely battle the establishment, dropping his voice to a chilling whisper amplified by the microphone, he went on, "The everyday individual is the $27 supporter representative." And you wasted their $27 on a luxury hotel they literally cannot afford to visit. Frozen in profound silence, AOC sat beneath the glaring lights as a lonely figure eternally haunted by the ghosts of 148 betrayed donors hiding behind every single luxury hotel receipt. Casually standing up and effortlessly fixing his collar, the universal motion of a dominant victor who is entirely finished, Vance declared they had covered the topic of grassroots financing. The $27 donor absolutely deserves to know exactly where their $27 went, and now they finally know. 5-star luxury vacations, 14-course handcrafted sushi, VIP arena suites, chartered business jets, and a ketamine physician falsely recorded as a consultant. Taking the surprisingly thin folder, his voice turned into a massive hammer as he reminded her that he drove a silver Chevy Malibu for $247 a week, ate stale fuel station food, stole the internet from Sheets, and won a United States Senate seat. You blew $200,000 of other people's desperate money pretending to fight the elite from directly inside the elite. And you lost the absolute only thing that actually mattered. He paused to let the lethal blow land: their trust. Abruptly sitting back down, he formally ended the explosive hearing with one sharp, echoing, and utterly final bang of the wooden gavel that left absolutely no room for debate. The raw 5-3 second video of Vance's lethal question, the agonizing 1-0 second delay, and the brutal 148 calculation required zero clever editing and transformed into an unstoppable internet sensation. It amassed an unbelievable 22 million views in just 8 hours purely because it was rooted in undeniable arithmetic. The only principle the fractured internet is completely incapable of arguing against. As panicked progressive defenders nervously penned drafted excuse memos claiming political travel was normal, the internet's vicious response stayed the same. 148 people, $27. One night, Compute the numbers. In hours, 148 transcended a mathematical digit to become a societal benchmark. If a dubious organization wasted $50,000 on a lavish dinner, the web quickly calculated it equaled exactly 1,852 strained Americans, essentially providing the number as a convenient tool for anyone with a smartphone calculator to measure the vast chasm between populist talk and extravagant financial records. Quite reluctantly, a veteran progressive strategist admitted on MSNBC that the situation was catastrophic because you cannot debunk simple division. Within 48 hours, an anonymous coder launched 148donors.com, a web page that instantly told users exactly how many $27 grassroots backers it took to pay for any inputted political expense. The absolute most targeted input was AOC's infamous $35,000 Met Gala ticket, equating to precisely 1,296 duped supporters, whereas her $150 luxury sushi dinner morphed into a cruel punchline equaling exactly 5.6 donors, mathematically demonstrating a hardworking resident's contribution barely covered a fancy appetizer. Concurrently, the legend of Vance's rented Chevy Malibu went incredibly viral. Enterprise Rent-A-Car's official digital advertising team published a culturally relevant post confirming they rent silver Chevy Malibus for exactly $247 a week, collecting over 4 million likes. Someone succeeded in locating the precise Sheetz gas station in Lancaster, Ohio, prompting the entrepreneurial regional manager to erect a massive sign reading complimentary Wi-Fi, sufficient for a future VP, instantly transforming the mundane fuel stop into a popular tourist destination. In the meantime, an irritated Detroit home economics teacher recorded a passionate 7-minute TikTok video meticulously detailing exactly what $150 purchases at a discount grocery store. Concluding by staring directly into the camera while tightly gripping the lengthy checkout receipt, she proclaimed it equated to 2 full weeks of food for a struggling family of 3, or 14 small dishes for one politician, amassing 31 million views. Actual legal consequences arrived with terrifying speed. The Federal Election Commission suddenly fast-tracked the explosive complaint regarding the highly suspicious Dr. Boyle psychiatric payments. In a panicked defensive maneuver, AOC's campaign officially retained a premium, independent legal team, serving as the grim parallel of a terrified patient frantically seeking a secondary medical opinion. The House Ethics Committee abruptly announced a widely reported preliminary investigation into her recently exposed lavish spending patterns, a grim reality known in Washington as the unalterable step onto a steep downward escalator. The exorbitant expenses tied to the hypocritical Fighting Oligarchy tour officially became the main target of a massive Government Accountability Office probe filed by 2 Republican legislators and 1 independent. AOC's highly anticipated 2028 presidential polling numbers completely tanked, plunging a disastrous 9 full percentage points in the very first post-hearing national survey. An anonymous Democratic advisor conceded that Vance mercilessly transformed her $27 contributor superpower into extremely lethal kryptonite, ensuring the cursed number 148 would brutally chase her all the way to 2028 every single time she dared to ask the public for $27. The formerly applauded Fighting Oligarchy slogan turned instantly intensely toxic overnight because the behind-the-scenes reality of chartered corporate jets, 5-star luxury resorts, and $150 handcrafted sushi looked exactly identical to the very elite the lucrative expedition fiercely claimed to be fighting. Desperate to change the bleeding narrative, AOC finally uploaded a heavily curated Instagram image, humbly handing out hot food at a Bronx community event with the polished caption, "This is the labor. Always has been, Although it garnered 2 million loyal likes, it simultaneously attracted a ruinous flood of 340,000 furious comments. The absolute top response, pinned brutally with 89,000 likes, simply asked how many $27 donations the premium corporate jet to the fake public relations event took. Shattered and cornered, she did not have the nerve to post another message for 6 entire days. For Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, 6 full days of complete, terrified quiet was an unprecedented, colossal earthquake, and the horrifying magnitude of that disastrous quake was precisely 148. Distant from the immaculate lawns of Washington, Maria Gutierrez rested exhaustedly on the sagging edge of her cheap mattress in the Bronx. The TV volume was perpetually fixed at exactly 14 because the building walls were incredibly thin, and Maria strictly respected her tired neighbor's daytime sleep. At 6:40 p.m., Maria was still wearing her stained violet hospital scrubs purchased from the discount supply store for $22.99 apiece, having strategized to buy 3 at once to save precisely $8.97. In Maria's unforgiving world, you absolutely never risk wasting $8.97 when surviving on a grueling $38,000 a year bathing elderly individuals. Currently playing on the cracked screen of her cellular device was the explosive 5-3-second video of the Vance panel. She was watching it for a 4th consecutive time because the ruinous number 148 was still violently echoing inside her tired mind. Maria had been loyally contributing exactly $27 to AOC's campaign account every single month, setting up the recurring charge after watching a moving AOC internet video passionately condemning crushing rent costs, genuinely believing AOC knew what this struggle felt like. $27 was the sacred, unifying crusade number, and the exact specific amount Maria had painfully chosen to skip spending that very month on her young child, Isabella's 5th grade class picture package. Maria had knelt down and whispered, "Maybe next annum," to which little Isabella quietly answered, "All right," in that utterly devastating, mature way poor children say "all right" when they already understand it actually means no. $27 represented 148 exhausted Maria Gutierrez's barely surviving on $38,000 annually, painfully giving up their children's precious school photos, pooled together to fund one solitary luxury night at a massive resort she would absolutely never be able to afford visiting. Maria heavily launched her ActBlue app, stared blankly at the bright screen for precisely 10 seconds, the exact same devastating pause Vance had subjected AOC to, and then pressed cancel. Bitterly whispering to the empty, cramped apartment that AOC should start by sleeping at a highway motel if she truly wants to fight the elite, Maria slowly dragged herself into the tiny kitchen area to prepare a bleak, repetitive dinner of rice, beans, and chicken. It was the supper of a stressed person who deeply, achingly knew exactly what $27 truly meant, silently pledging that next month, those dollars were going to buy Isabella's photograph. Spanning the vast stretch of the gigantic city, 26-year-old Ronnie Castillo sat slumped behind the worn steering column of his beat-up silver Honda Civic. He was idling in the heavily smogged rideshare staging zone located right outside the busy terminals of LaGuardia Airport, having just finished an exhausting 10 hours of continuous driving. The Civic's driver's seat possessed a deep, permanent depression. It was a physical, lasting record of where the heavy weight of his chronically tired body had completely broken down the cheap, factory-standard cushioning over 63,000 brutal miles on the municipality's unforgiving roads. Premium ergonomic seat supports capable of supplying real back comfort cost, exactly $30. In Ronnie's harsh financial world, that $30 equated to 2 full hours of incredibly stressful driving in jammed traffic. As a result, that necessary product permanently remained trapped in his online shopping basket, perpetually postponed. His backup Lyft phone, a cracked iPhone 8 bought, used for a mere $60 in Jackson Heights, sat awkwardly wedged in the sticky cup receptacle. Simultaneously, the massively viral JD Vance committee clip played loudly from his primary Uber smartphone. Ronnie was the fiercely dedicated son of a hard-working mechanic whose back had disastrously failed in 2019. His mother was a committed cafeteria worker who earned an impossibly low $31,000 a year, feeding screaming hordes of students. Attempting to support his household's bills, he had signed up for Uber the exact week he graduated high school to desperately pay down a mountain of piling healthcare debts. Consequently, he ended up never going to his highly anticipated LaGuardia Community College orientation. The math of his everyday hustle was completely ruthless. After aggressively subtracting the constantly changing price of gas, exorbitant commercial coverage premiums, and predatory gig economy fees, his actual banked hourly pay hovered around a dismal $14. On disastrous shifts ruined by terrible congestion, it plummeted to a humiliating $9. Operating his own agonizing transportation business, he strictly earned significantly less than the high $22 minimum living wage. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez continuously screamed about during her television appearances. Moreover, Ronnie had never once purchased a single night inside a hotel room in his whole life. He sharply recalled having once driven the completely pitch-black, hazardous turnpike returning to New Jersey at 2:00 a.m. following his brother's wedding party. A basic roadside room cost far more than he could ever rationally justify, particularly given that his Honda Civic featured a free, manually reclining seat. Hearing the audio, Ronnie fiercely started calculating the disastrous figures. He took the unbelievable $53,500 squandered on luxury vacations and divided it by his own miserable yearly take-home pay of exactly $38,000. The ultimate mathematical answer hit him like a brutal physical punch directly to the gut. It equated to exactly 1.4 years of his entire life dedicated to executing agonizing 10-hour shifts and rotting inside LaGuardia staging areas. He had donated exactly $27 to AOC once in January 2024 out of pure panic regarding his lease after watching an infuriating social media video concerning skyrocketing housing costs. He had typed the numbers from his frayed debit card through painful muscle memory. 148 copies of myself, Ronnie murmured grimly to the lit dashboard. Suddenly, the Uber application pinged with a fresh request, and he accepted the fare, putting the Honda into gear. The electronic navigation program guided him past a colossal, faded AOC campaign sign featuring her practiced smile next to the bold words, "For the citizens." Glancing down at his pathetic $14 fare estimate, a sum almost enough to purchase that back support, yet not quite enough, he forcefully stomped the gas pedal and drove directly past the giant billboard. She had courageously stood upright and called Vance an elitist. Yet Vance had calmly revealed her luxury lodging receipts. She flew on business planes to fight the powerful, while the VP operated a pathetic silver Chevy Malibu to win a Senate position. She gluttonously ate 14 courses of premium sushi, while he subsisted on a cheap McChicken and tightly held a free McDonald's beverage. God bless Maria Gutierrez for canceling a fraudulent $27 campaign donation so her kid could get a cherished school portrait. And God bless Ronnie Castillo exhaustedly driving past a fading "For the Citizens" billboard every single night. God bless every solitary $27 supporter who foolishly trusted their hard-earned money was going straight to the fight, because it absolutely was not. Instead, $53,500 was wasted on luxury hotels, $18,725 diverted to a ketamine physician, $23,000 blown on private venue fees, $150 on handcrafted sushi, and $550,000 disappeared on corporate jets. Precisely 148 people, strained residents, laboring, exhausting back-to-back shifts, giving up children's school pictures, and sleeping in cold cars stood behind every solitary luxury hotel bill. The typical constituent is the $27 donor, and she heartlessly threw away their desperate funds on a lavish resort they literally cannot afford to see 148 people. One solitary night. Compute the numbers. The terrifying question haunting Washington right now was not if Ocasio-Cortez could ever succeed in outrunning the disastrous, unavoidable arithmetic of 148. It was what she would do when she ultimately realized that the thin folder JD Vance had calmly closed on his desk was merely part one.